Breaking the stigma of addiction.
This is Zach's life, a story of love, addiction, loss, grief, and recovery.
Reflecting on Zachary Horton
And others in our community,
both inside and outside of their addiction. Hosted by Jim Horton
of the Zachary Horton Foundation.
Hi, good morning, Mary Beth.
Good morning.
Hey, today is an exciting day, not only because my audience gets to meet you, but because I get to use the Zoom recording, a part of the podcast. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, if you go and find it on the YouTube channel, then you'll be able to see both Mary Beth and I as we discuss these great topics today. So yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. Today, my guest is Mary Beth O'Connor. Mary Beth has an incredible book that she's written called From Junkie to Judge. She's a retired federal judge. She has a long history of substance use disorder. She has a long history of recovery. She has did not necessarily follow a traditional 12-step program from what I've read, Mary Beth, in your in all your bio information. And as you know, our podcast focuses on love, addiction, loss, grief, and recovery. And I know as I read your story, that melds just so wonderfully with what you talk about. So you know, I want to get your words in as much as possible today. So please, as it fits into all of that, please just tell us about your history, tell us about your recovery, tell us about the things that are so important to you and the incredible message that I hear that you're sending out.
So actually for me, things that started not well from before I was born because it was 1961 and my mother was an unwed Catholic, Irish Catholic mother, and this was problematic. And so after she had me, she wasn't allowed to bring me home, and I lived with the nuns for the first 6 months of my life. And I think she said she visited, and I expect she did, but it wasn't that, you know, bonded, spending a lot of time with your mother situation. And then even when I moved in with her, she wasn't really that interested in being a mom. She wasn't focused. I mean, she fed me, she clothed me, she took me to the doctor, you know, all the basic things, but there wasn't attention. She wasn't particularly interested in what I was doing or thinking. She was more interested in you not irritating her or doing something that would make her yell or hit. And so that.
Well, and let me say, that's not uncommon for, you know, my birth date's in 1962. So our parents were of that era, right? So that's not necessarily uncommon that children were to be seen and not heard. And if you were heard too much, you understood why.
Yes, to a degree, but I will say she was more lost control and got a lot angrier and a lot less trigger than what I saw it happen in other households when I was visiting my friends. But you're right, it wasn't the same hyper focus on child rearing that we have today. That is true. So when she left me again with my great grandmother for 3 years, from when I was 6 until when I was 9. And my great grandmother was a good woman. That was basically a calm time. But then my mother married my stepfather when I was 9, and I moved in with them. And he was really exceedingly violent. He was very violent with her. He was verbally, emotionally, physically, and sexually violent with me. It was the kind of at first, I tried to figure him out. Like, how can I satisfy this person, right? What are these new rules that I'm not used to? Like, he had a thing about I wasn't allowed to call my mother she. Couldn't refer to her as she. Had to say mom or something similar every time. Or couldn't go barefoot in the house. Well, I'm from New Jersey. In the summer, you always went barefoot. So there was a lot of weird rules that I tried to figure out and adjust to. But over time, I realized that no matter what I did, the violence was going to hit me. It was just, I never knew when, because I could do the same exact thing 20 times, and 19 of those times it was fine. And on the 20th, it was suddenly, an error worth a beating. And so I got beat for things like spilling milk or putting a dirty dish away. I developed techniques that I taught my sister, like when my stepfather was sleeping, when we were doing our chores, I taught her to put one dish away in the cabinet at a time when we emptied the dishwasher, because it wouldn't rattle, right? And so it was just a lot of trying to reduce the violence, but there was no way to eliminate it. And so there could be weeks where he was happy, but you never knew. So it was a lot of stress and strain from that, not knowing when an attack was going to happen and having no real control over what was going to trigger him. So that was problematic.
And I'm sure as children, we understand, believe that whatever happens in the world, good and bad, it has to do with them. It's their fault, or they caused it somehow. That has to be a heavy burden on a 9-year-old and again, for you to have to go through the mental calisthenics of figuring out how do I make this stop? Because I have to be in control. I'm doing something wrong. It's, one dish at a time. That'll make it okay, right? I mean, we can look at it now and we just realize how bizarre that is. And we know that it's not your fault, that was his illness, that was his sickness, but still, I'm sure at that time you felt like somehow that you had to own that.
I did in the beginning. I just thought, well, this is a new household with different rules, and I just have to, figure out the rules and comply. But over time, certainly within a year, I knew that was not what was happening. What was happening was he was tired, he was angry, he was mad about something that happened at work or with my mother, and he would lash out. So I did realize that it wasn't really about me, and that the best I could do was reduce the frequency, but I couldn't eliminate the threat. And so that's part of what made drugs look appealing to me, because I started using my first drug, which was alcohol, at 12. And I remember that first time. It was Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. Very sweet, but it was, when I had that first drinks, it was really like my tension got released. I felt like I could giggle and I laugh with my girlfriend. We were down in our basement alone. No one else was home. And it was just like a breath, I could take a breath. I could really feel looser and more connected with her. And so it was a positive experience in the beginning. And that is why people who have abuse histories like I do have, I think it's a 4 to 6 times greater rate of developing substance use disorders. It looks in the beginning like it's helping, but it doesn't help for long. That's the problem.
Right. Yeah. But again, at your age, in your preteen years or your teen years, you're just looking for anything.
Yes.
You're looking for that. And then all of a sudden, then that becomes a solution until it's not.
Right. I mean, I started pursuing alcohol pretty much right away. I was looking for opportunities to drink, and, we would raid our parents' liquor cabinet, or the drinking age was actually 18 in New Jersey when I was young. So I had easier access as a young 13, 14-year-old girl who was I was tall. I looked older. I did hair and makeup. I was always going out with older guys. So I had pretty easy access to alcohol. And then the next step was pot, weed, as they would say today. And then we always stole pills out of parents' medicine cabinets, and we'd figure out which ones did something, which ones didn't. And then when I was 16, things took a big turn, because I found what became my drug of choice, which was methamphetamine. And I was shooting up at 17 and in full bore addiction when I graduated from high school. So it escalated pretty quickly.
Wow. Now, was that common in your high school? Was meth use in your neighborhood or your neck of the woods, or were you really an outlier in that?
So it was just really coming into town in volume. So meth had existed before, but it wasn't mass produced. At least it wasn't distributed in my area of central New Jersey until the mid 70s. There were biker gangs out in Western Pennsylvania that were producing it. That was what was my understanding. And so there was it was relatively new, that it was easily accessible. And we really didn't view it as, problematic. Heroin was bad. Don't do heroin. That's how you get addicted. Right. But meth, is fun. Although the truth is, within 6 months of the meth flood, there were a number of people having problems. But I was definitely on the extreme edge of frequency of use, severity of use. Other people using meth would tell me I was overdoing it, that I needed to sleep, that I needed to slow down. So it was in high volume. My people, the druggy people, a noticeable percentage used it, but not the way I did, not at the constant daily, pretty much not doing any other drug except meth very quickly.
Wow. Now, and so so this was so your graduation was probably close to probably around 79, 80.
Yes.
Right.
79. Yeah.
Right. So then, and I know that soon after that, the national message that we heard about drug use over the air, that would have been the Nancy Reagan campaign, really was the Just Say No.
Yeah.
Do you have any recollection about how that hit you, or what kind of effect that had on you or the people that were around you?
I mean, I was probably in college by the time that happened, but we, in my world, it was a joke, right? Just saying no. First of all, we thought, why would you? But also remember, we had been given a lot of false messages about drugs earlier, right? About LSD was going to make you go crazy and end up in a mental institution. Well, that clearly wasn't the case. Lots of people I knew did acid and nobody ended up in anything like that. Or that pot was somehow way worse than alcohol, which was visibly not true. Visibly not true. From looking at the people who struggled with alcohol was a much bigger group than the people who struggled with marijuana. And so the messages that we had been given about drugs previously were not true. And so this was just another one of that category. But also later, as I tracked this in the news, it became clear that the data showed it wasn't working, which wasn't a big surprise to us. I mean, to just tell people to say no isn't really that helpful. You have to give them techniques, but you also have to figure out what's the root cause of people turning to drugs. And again, the other thing is, just say no suggests that all drug use is problematic. And that's just not true. I mean, a lot of people use alcohol and cannabis and even, LSD and Coke occasionally, now and then, and they don't become addicted. I mean, I think people need to be aware of the risks so they can make an informed choice. But Just Say No was partly saying that any drug use, including any and all marijuana use, was somehow making you a hardcore drug addict whose life was going to explode and go downhill, and you would have no success, which was clearly not true.
Well, sure, and I think culturally we have a history of when I say we, parental figures, leader figures, we have a history of lying.
Yes.
To the public. So, we put out Reefer Madness, right? I remember the old video.
I've seen it.
Someone smokes marijuana and they turn into some kind of a horrific fiend. Or again, anyone who uses heroin, is completely lost, and they're under a bridge with their teeth falling out and they're homeless, right? And so these are the experiences. And then when we understand, and this is what's hit me so just in my face about even the message that I gave to my son. And now I've said this a couple of times as it's begun to resonate with me. When my son was young and he would be sick at home, the first thing I would do is I'd give him a pill of something, right? Your allergies are up, here's a Benadryl, right? Okay, we're going to take care of that. And then if he got really sick, or if he had a cold, here's some child, right now there's a national scare that we can't get enough, medicine for children, in the drugstores, right? So our kids are sick. We want them to be better. We give them some medicine. We give them a drug, right? And then if they're really sick, we go to the doctor, and the doctor prescribes even a stronger drug for them. And then somehow now we're surprised when they're 14, 15, and they're in high school and they're feeling anxiety or they're feeling different, and their friends, who now is their source of information, the people they trust, say, here, take this, and they take it. And now we want to give them the message that all drugs are bad, when we've been telling them their whole life that's what's good. I mean, I talk about mixed messages, and we still feel that. I still feel that today, because there's different studies come out about either foods or supplements or medications that I may even be taking. So it's again, mixed messages all the time.
Well, and I think it's particularly true around alcohol, right? Because alcohol, what is alcohol? It's a liquid legal drug. It's is the number one substance killer in America, and yet it's legal. There's no rational basis why alcohol would be legal, and especially why cannabis wouldn't, but even other drugs. But on the other hand, I think we do want to educate our children about the true risks, right? Give them the real information, accurate information, also how to look for signs if they're developing a problem and what to do about that. I know my younger nieces and nephews. I had a lengthy substance use disorder. Their mother did, their father. And so when they were coming into their teens, what I said to them was, look, I'm not saying your friends might not have fun drinking or smoking pot or whatever. What I'm saying to you is you are at higher risk. And so you need to be more careful and you need to pay attention. If you do use these substances, is it becoming a problem? Because there is some data that suggests that it's a higher risk genetically, but also they were growing up in an environment that was problematic, and that the environmental impact also would have put them at higher risk. So I try to be honest with them. Here, it destroyed me for many years. And, but I can't say your friends aren't having fun or that there's not, a social aspect to it, that many people use these things without developing a problem, but you have a higher risk and you need to keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, which is what we do with other diseases. It's what we do if my family has a history of cancer, right, and of skin cancer, and if we're a light-skinned family, then we, that's another analogy that I bring in all the time. Sunscreen is evident. It's not that you can't ever go out in the sun, but you need to be aware of it. You need to wear a hat. You need to wear a swim shirt. We need to put a sunscreen on. And we have those conversations with our children about those things over and over and over and over. It's not once at 5th grade or, once when you go into high school or, yeah.
That's right. I mean, and the other thing is that, for example, with cannabis, the government wasn't even allowing research. And so only now are they doing the research that's going to show us the data for the true risk of cannabis. I mean, don't get me wrong. Right now, it looks like it's much less problematic than alcohol and most other drugs, but that doesn't mean it's 100% risk-free. And so, it's better that we get the data so that we can inform the people that are considering it. Here's what the real risks are. Here's, smoking is worse than edibles, or, if you see these symptoms, or if you're using it for these reasons. I mean, a lot of it's really about why are you using it? And we don't even focus today in substance use disorder definitions necessarily on how often or how much, but really about the impact of it. Is it interfering with your life? Is it interfering with your ability to do schoolwork? Are you dropping your extracurricular activities because you're spending so much time, or you're hungover? Are you losing friendships? Are your friends expressing concerns? All of those sort of factors to be looked at so that we can help them stay on top of it if they choose to do it, and that any problem signs get recognized and attacked early. And the other side of that is that a lot of teenagers and adults use it as a way to treat mental health issues that would be better treated other ways, but they're not put into the mental health system either because of lack of insurance, because we don't have readily available, affordable mental health treatment for a large group, percentage of our population, and or, medications. And so if we can keep our eye on, is there a mental health issue that's raising its head? Let's resolve that. Let's jump on that. And then maybe the drug problem won't ever arise because it's being treated appropriately, the right treatment for the right condition.
Right. Well, and I can, Mary Beth, that awareness, that understanding, really, in my mind, having those discussions, that really helps eliminate the stigma, right? Which is the mission of our foundation, is about eliminating the stigma of addiction, right? But you know what? That stigma of mental health, that stigma of somehow if someone has a substance use disorder, if someone's experiencing depression, if someone has that's somehow a weakness
Right.
in them. It's something to be hidden. It's something that I can't, that I can't talk about. And only when I know in the news just recently, the producer from Ellen's show, who was the DJ there, Stitch, I believe,
Twitch, yeah, Twitch, yeah.
Twitch passed from a suicide, and for a week, that's what we heard, right? And there's commercials about it, which is great that there's awareness, but how was it that obviously he didn't wake up that morning and all of a sudden was so overwhelmed with depression or whatever his issue was that was the cause. It was something that had been developed, but it's nothing that anyone, even in the Hollywood world where there's paparazzi and everyone knows everybody's business all the time, there wasn't a headline about that had ever reached the pages. So he was able, either he felt like he needed to keep it hidden, or again, the stigma surrounding that was so great. And that's, boy, again, just being able to have these discussions, being able to be to be honest. And I'm saying, when we're in the middle of this, I mean, you are years and years and years past the severity of your disease, and you're able to talk about it now frequently. My guess is, in the beginning, when you started, that wasn't something that you wanted to write books about and announce and get out there. And nor was it when I found out about my son's struggles. I didn't want to go out and tell everybody. In fact, I was in such denial because I don't know. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I don't even know if those are the right words, because it didn't even come into my mind. I just denied it. The brain is an incredible vehicle that can just stop you from recognizing reality in some of those cases. So how do we do that? How do we have the discussion you and I are having now? How do we have that with our children, who we don't even imagine have any mental illness or any propensity toward drug addiction? How do we have it with them now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, look, I'm not a parent, and so there's a limit to how much, well-founded my advice is. But in general, when I look around my family, and I will say, when I talk, I do emphasize that I am a friend and family too, right, of substance use disorder and other mental health issues. Everyone I know in recovery is also a friend or family member of people who are struggling with these things, because that's our social group, but also our families tend to have, some of these similar problems that run through it. So I understand the frustration with my siblings or friends of trying to get them into recovery. I understand we don't have the control that we want. I mean, I put my sister in my rehab, and she stayed there for 8 days, so, I understand that struggle to try. Why don't you just do what I'm telling you to do? I'm right. Yes, you are probably right. But that doesn't mean you can just, get people to automaton into your plan. But I think it is for parents in particular, because they're living with the person. So hopefully they can have a history of open communication up to those teenage years that will be a good foundation. But the reality is that teenagers push parents back and they rebel, and the relationship becomes more challenging. And so even if you have the good foundation, hopefully it'll make it more likely they'll turn to you, but also trying to keep your eyes peeled and pay attention to what's going on. I think one of the real challenges of today is that so many of the overdose deaths are of people who are casual users, right? It used to be that almost all of the overdose deaths were people who had a substance use disorder. And first of all, that's heroin, of course, but I think people underappreciate how many people die from stimulants. It's a significant number, tens of thousands a year also die from stimulants. But with fentanyl, people are dying when they aren't really, they don't have a substance use disorder. They're just using here and there. And that's part of the sort of the shocking new reality. So it's harder to see the signs if your child
right.
isn't in the midst of an ongoing substance use problem. If it was at a party or it's casual, or, you know, they ordered something off the internet for them and their 5 friends. And so I think it is harder, you know, it is harder today to really be able to see it. But it's important, all the more reason, to have honest, realistic conversations about the risks, to talk about what's happening today. People are ordering things, they don't know what's in them. I don't care what you're taking today, unless you test it, you don't know what's in it. And even if you test it for fentanyl, those strips, it's good, it's great, they need to be readily available. They don't tell you the percentage, right? And so is it a little bit of fentanyl, or is it more? And when I say fentanyl, of course, a small amount is a high dose, actually, but still, you know, is it 2% fentanyl or is it 20% fentanyl can matter in your risk. So I do think parents need to educate themselves about the current reality and why it is that even casual users are a significant part of the deaths, and then have those fact-based conversations with their children.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so and thank you. This is, I mean, this is great information for our families. And again, just the same way that we're having this conversation, parents can begin to have that conversation. And it doesn't have to be shrouded in negative connotations. It's just a factual conversation that we're having. And frankly, it's not just parents having those conversations with their friends. My gosh, if I could have had those conversations with my golfing buddies, right? Or just the guys that I'm having coffee with, or the people that I'm working with, if we had had those conversations, my level of denial and misunderstanding may not have been so high. I would have recognized things, you know, sooner. So yeah, absolutely. So let's go back a little bit to your story. So now, okay, we see you're at the end of high school, you're an IV meth user, you have really graduated in more ways than one, right? to where you're going in your life. So how did you get from, because this is strange, I don't want to be lost on this, how did you get from there to judge? That's I mean, what a story. Again, you've got lots of stories. You should write a book. Oh wait.
I did. Yeah. So for me, I did go to college. I went to Berkeley, and I did better my first 3.5 years. I emphasize better, not great, but better. And I mostly used alcohol, sometimes pills, sometimes Coke, which was new to me, but, you know, similar-ish to meth. Occasionally it would roll into the week, but mostly I kept it to the weekends. But I had a very life-threatening multi-assailant rape in college. And then I moved in with a violent boyfriend, and that was it. I couldn't hang on. I did not have the reserves to be able to hang on with those new traumas. And so I started using meth again in January of my senior year of college, and I used until I was 32. So it was a long haul. It was a long haul. And as I say, during those years, I worked my way down the corporate ladder because I couldn't hold a job because I was always on meth. And so every job was less money and less responsibility, and I held it for less time. And my body was starting to break down at 32. I was having physical problems. Meth is a vicious, you know, drug on your body. And I was just, you know, beyond exhausted. I mean, you know, exhausted at the deepest, deepest, deepest level, and depressed and hopeless. And my partner was going to throw me out. He was done. He couldn't take it anymore. And so it was all of those things in combination that finally got me to say, well, I might as well try rehab. You know, I didn't have any faith that I could get sober, but, you know, I was willing to go and to give it a shot. And so I went to rehab when I was 32 years old.
And let's just reflect on that for a moment, because my guess is that after 8 years of prolonged meth use and then maybe another 10 years previous to that of just other drug use, you've established a pretty good pattern of how Mary Beth survives. This is how I survive.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you know, we develop habits, you know, poor eating habits that we can't break our entire lives. You had a method of survival, abusive relationships, of whatever else internally was happening with you. And it was tried and true in your mind, that's how I survived until it no longer worked. But you had years of that. So breaking that is, I mean, just incredible. I don't know what the statistics are, but I'm guessing they're not very good for people that have that extended use and dependency to be able to break at that point. Much better odds, I'm guessing, if it's caught early on.
So I'll say a couple of things to that. Is one is on the survival side. I honestly did believe this was my best option. I thought the only other two options were suicide, or that I was going to have a mental break, a psychotic break of some kind, and end up institutionalized. I really felt those are my three choices: suicide, institutionalized, or drugs. And so that's what I believed. And it seemed like the best of the three options.
Yeah.
And then on the stopping, the reality is a lot of people do stop in their 30s. A lot of people who develop substance use disorder in their teenage years or their 20s. 30s is a common time for people, first of all, to have accrued so many consequences that they just can't handle it anymore. But also maybe to start to wish for something better and not to spend their life like this. And so yeah, so but on the other hand, I knew I was a severe case. I mean, I remember when I was in rehab, I got bronchitis and I had to go to the ER, and I picked up the chart to see what he wrote down, and he wrote history of severe drug addiction. And I was kind of mad. It's like, you just met me. I only told you a little, but it's like, no, he was right. History of severe drug addiction. And so I knew I was in bad shape. And so when I went into rehab, I actually went into a longer term inpatient program. It was 90 days minimum, and I ended up staying for 5 months. I wasn't really looking at 30-day programs. I didn't think that would be sufficient. So I had to work hard to find, I didn't have insurance and I didn't have cash. And so I had to work hard to find a program that would take me, that I could actually afford. And then I had to call every Monday between 9 and noon for 10 or 12 weeks until my name worked up the wait list. And if I would have missed 1 week, I would have dropped to the bottom again. And so I was actually proud that I had accomplished calling every week for 10 weeks until a spot opened up and my name was at the top, which isn't the way it should be, by the way. People need readily accessible, affordable treatment. Most people don't hang on that long. They drop off the list, and gosh knows how many more years they're going to spend in their substance use disorder, or if they're going to die.
Well, and boy, just as you're telling that story, the irony is that the people who have insurance or can't afford it are usually at the beginning of their journey, where they're probably not wanting to reach out. They're probably still in denial about their own disease. It's at the point where you're talking about, where it's like, holy cow, I've exhausted everything. I'm near death. I have nothing left. And then that's when there are the least amount of facilities or ability to get help.
Although I will say that, I'm on the board for LifeRing, and She Recovers, and I participate, and I am happy to see that a higher percentage of people, it seems to me, without true data, but are coming in earlier. And that's good. I mean, this concept of a bottom is an old-fashioned way of thinking. I mean, a bottom was always retrospective. Okay, now that I got some lengthy sobriety, where was my bottom looking back? But the problem is people die waiting to hit a bottom. I mean, intervene now. When I talk to newbies, I tell them, intervene as early as you can, because it's fewer years lost. And even though you may have destroyed many things in your life, you're going to destroy more if you wait, right? So intervene early. And I do see people come in who have jobs but they have a problem, and maybe they got a DUI, or a partner or someone else is really pressuring them. And I'm so happy when I see people come in that haven't destroyed their entire life. Their odds of recovery are higher. And don't get me wrong, low bottoms can recover too, but it is advantageous for multiple reasons to try to get help earlier, to try to break that cycle as early as you can.
Awesome. Mary Beth, you just mentioned two programs that before I spoke with you, I was unfamiliar with. And so I would love for you, if you don't mind, this would be a great time to talk about this. I've often believed that not everyone, your childhood and the trauma that you experienced was definitely extreme. And I've heard that story several times from people that have ended up in a substance use disorder. But I also know that people get into the depths of their addiction many other ways. And I believe just as there are many ways that people enter addiction, there's many ways that they can get sober as well. And in the past, 12-step programs were, and you talked about an old way of thinking about, you've got to hit your bottom. And the 12-step program, we've treated substance use disorder for decades and almost an entire century the same way. But there are new thoughts. There are different ways. And you mentioned two. If you would talk about just both of those briefly, just because a lot of people listening or watching today may have never heard about them.
Yeah, so and I'll preface that with I have 28 years of sobriety, and I was told when I went into rehab in '93 that the 12-step way was the one and only way. They were really adamant, and I don't believe in a higher power. I wasn't comfortable with a powerless idea or turning my will and my life over. And so I read through all of the 12-step books, and I attended meetings as I was told to do, and I pulled out some useful ideas, but it wasn't the right fit. And so when I got home from rehab, I went to the library, and I emphasize that because there was no Google, okay? Went to the library, and I did find options. They existed then and they exist today. And the two that I'm affiliated with are LifeRing Secular Recovery and She Recovers Foundation. I'm on the board for both. And so LifeRing is basically their approach is about building a personal recovery plan, which is what I did, a plan that's going to work for you as an individual. And they focus on the 3 S's of sobriety, secularity, and self-help. And so for us, we view your success in recovery as based on your own motivation and your own efforts. In other words, we don't view you as powerless. And we want people to really do an analysis about sort of who they are, where they are, where they want to go, and how they think they can get there, and figure out what their initial recovery plan is. And then it gets adjusted over time because, you succeed in your initial goals and now you can set new ones. And so we have a workbook that can help people do the analysis to figure out what their initial plan should look like. I mean, the reality is people don't all come in the rooms in the same place, right? I was talking about people who come in, some of whom have a job. Well, one person may have a job, but destroy relationships. Somebody else, it could be the opposite. A lot of people have mental health issues and trauma histories like I did, or they just have different personalities and learning styles and philosophical beliefs. And so it's really about what plan will work for me. And we encourage members that this doesn't mean alone. It means read, research, attend, listen, actively look for and grab onto those ideas that you think will be useful. That's exactly what I did. I read materials for the 4 groups that I found. I went to meetings for all of them, and I pulled out the ideas I thought would help me. And the other reality is that sometimes what works in the beginning or what you need in the beginning, it changes over time as you evolve in your recovery or as you evolve in life. And so part of it is really adjusting your plan intermittently and seeing, okay, it's been 3 months. So now what's my new plan? I've accomplished these 3 things. So I can start attacking some other areas. And so that's their basic idea. And
now,
then
are there meetings for this group in all communities, or if they're not in a specific community that someone is listening, like if say that's not happening here in Fresno, are there online meetings then that they can get a hold of? And are there sponsors, or is there similar language that the recovery community is going to be familiar with, that they can understand and connect with?
So before COVID, we had around 200 meetings in the US, and we have meetings in other countries. And we had 6 meetings online pre-COVID because we didn't have a meeting in Montana, right? And it allowed people to participate. We have around 85 meetings online right now, including some for specialty groups like women or LGBTQIA+, veterans, other subgroups, and workbook meetings. So every week, more meetings are going back to face-to-face, or new meetings are opening face-to-face. But if there isn't a meeting in your community, then yes, we will continue to have a large number of online meetings going forward, in part because people have gotten used to them and a lot of people like them now, and it's easier. So it'll be a mix. The other thing to know about LifeRing is that If you want to go to the, let's say, local AA or NA meeting and do LifeRing online, LifeRing is okay with that. We do not require an exclusive commitment to LifeRing. If our members think that going to both LifeRing and 12 steps is the best chance for their success, LifeRing supports that. That's okay. You do what you need. And so you can mix and match. If someone tells you you have to sign in blood an exclusive agreement with someone, that to me is a red flag. It should be about what do you need? And that's what LifeRing encourages. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. So LifeRing. So that's I'm going to get more information about that too, just so I can and maybe even add that to our website, because we have a page of resources.
Oh, good. That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll get that information from. I'm sure it's just LifeRing.org. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. And now you're then the other organization that you represent as well.
So She Recovers Foundation, which is sherecovers.org, that is actually not just for substance use disorder. About 75% of the members have one, but it's also about recovery from trauma, mental health, behavioral disorders like eating disorders, shopping disorders, also self-harm, grief. It's really, we say everyone's in recovery from something, but it's really everything in one place. And the reason for that is because most women with a substance use disorder also have one or more of these other areas that they're also in recovery from. And so when She Recovers, it's not siloed off. Like you talk about your substance use disorder, and in this other meeting, you talk about your eating disorder or your mental health group. So it's all together. And so we have 2 meetings a day, every day. We have local geographic chapters who have meetings in person and online. We have subgroups as well, like legal professionals, first responders, women with high needs children. We have groups like that meet separately. And then we have retreats, and yoga and dance. So She Recovers is big into the mind-body connection. And so we have yoga meetings and dance meetings. And we have a very active Facebook group that the women support each other and share what's going on. And we'll literally say, I need support, who's out there? And women will respond to her. And there's YouTube videos, Mental Health Mondays. So there's a lot of different aspects to She Recovers.
Awesome. Well, and just in general too, I have to say that, and again, my eyes have been opened much more than I ever wanted them to. But now that the recovery community in general that I found is very supportive of their group. And I can say when Zach was going through his issues, I attended Nar-Anon meetings and other 12-step programs, and any meeting I could find where I could get some support. And I also went to some AA and NA meetings, and I have to say that I found the greatest sense of hope and encouragement wasn't from the Nar-Anon meetings that I was attending, because we were all just very broken people, right? That were just continually sad with little hope. But it's when I went to the NA meetings, those were a blast. I mean, the people there were excited because their lives were changing, right? And maybe that's where that hope was. I mean, they saw a future that was bright and hopeful, and maybe they had already lived through the worst for them. I mean, maybe that's what it was. But I found that the support groups in recovery and the community in recovery is just very, very loving and caring and helpful.
Yeah, I mean, the different groups have different philosophies and even meeting formats. Like in LifeRing, we don't have a meeting format, and either in She Recovers, where someone speaks for like 20 minutes of the hour and tells their story. We have a focus on what's going on today, what happened last week, and what's coming up next week. And She Recovers similarly is focused on current events. Also, FYI, She Recovers is also multiple paths. So you can do 12 steps in She Recovers, Women for Sobriety, all that. But yeah, it is a relief when you're new to see people who have succeeded and who have had the same issue. It's part of why I named my book From Junkie to Judge. So it's, From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, because the trauma was a separate recovery or intertwined recovery. But I really wanted to be able to stand up and connect myself, own myself as an IV meth addict. And part of the reason is because I think in the media, they sort of present it sometimes like it's hopeless for people that are shooting meth, right? They're never going to recover. They're
Right,
too far
right.
gone. And so I wanted to really affiliate myself with that group and say, she is me, right? I was her. And look how it ended up. And it's not even that I think judge is the most important part of my recovery, because it isn't. It's just that, I'm proud of the accomplishment, but it has a certain positive social resonance. And it's really sort of a shorthand way to say in recovery, even an IV meth addict in recovery, no idea what she could be, where her life could go. If we help her get her feet underneath her, if we help her get her sobriety, if we help her move forward. And so it's all those reasons. And it's about standing up and being, hopefully a sign of hope for others that they too can recover. And sometimes people say to me, well, not everybody goes to law school and becomes a judge. And it's like, well, I didn't know at 2020, I went to law school 6.5 years sober. I became a judge 20 years sober. It's not as if that was my goal on day one, right? It's really about what's my right next step, what's my right next goal. And that builds up over 6 years and 20 years. And you can really, move forward in all kinds of ways with that kind of time. And so it's just a reminder that in recovery, our lives can be more than we can possibly imagine on day one when we step into rehab or step into a peer support group.
Well, and I think of people that I have the privilege to speak with that are new in their recovery. I think many of them still have very negative outlooks as to what they can become. They're happy about where they're at right now and where they're going, and they see that as a wonderful step forward. But they don't. And I think, and a lot of them that are younger too, young people like to think about, I want what I want now, right? I need to have the new car now. I need to have a house now. I need to have all the furnishings now. And, as I've gotten older, I realize that for me, it's just, maybe having 1% more of productivity every day, just a little bit more. I just want today, I want to be a little bit better today than I was yesterday. Not even a lot, just a little bit. And if I can do that and I can build on that, then that can grow. And that brings you to one of the last topics I'd love to get your thoughts on it is, and I know it's been around for a long time. It's gaining momentum as far as just the verbiage, and people are talking more about harm reduction. I turned on the radio the other day, and it was an NPR station, and they were having this big discussion about addiction, and harm reduction was one of the main topics. And what was great about it is it wasn't gosh, how can I say this? It wasn't like a couple old hippies talking about like what harm reduction could be or what it is, but it was a well thought out, meaningful, scientific medical discussion about what it was and how it works and how it can really change how we think. And again, it's about just about moving forward. And again, and I'm gonna shut up now. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I will say that I personally took advantage of harm reduction in my addiction. I used the needle exchange. It was in San Francisco in the late 80s, early 90s. It wasn't legal, but it was tolerated. And so I believe it was a private organization that was doing the needle exchange. It was twice a week, and the police would just drive by. They just drove by. So it was tolerated. And that is, and the reason was because of AIDS and HIV. It was because they viewed the risk of AIDS spreading further in the community as a higher negative than giving people needles. And so that's how that part of it started. And I took advantage of that. And I think it significantly reduced my risk. When I got sober, I didn't have HIV. I didn't have Hep C. I didn't have any of the bloodborne, diseases that I could have had.
So for people that, because even when I'm talking to people now and I'm giving out Narcan and I'm doing Narcan trainings, I still get discussions from people, but if I have that, aren't I giving permission to my kids to be an opiate user? I mean, did you ever, in getting a clean needle, think to yourself for a moment, oh, now I'm going to keep using because I have a clean needle? Was that even in your mindset?
Look, I mean, the data, there's a lot of data around most of these harm reduction techniques from Canada and Europe, right? And so whether it's the needle exchange, or now they call it safe syringe programs, where they don't actually make you necessarily exchange a needle, because if you're homeless or a drug addict, you can't always, you know, keep track of them, right? But there's that, there's Narcan, there's safe injection sites, which are also called overdose prevention centers, many techniques of meeting people at where they are. But the data shows that, for example, the needles, giving out free needles, does not increase the percentage of drug addiction. More than that, it actually reduces it. Because people who have access to these services, like overdose prevention centers or needle syringe services, they actually go into treatment at like 3 to 5 times the rate of people that don't have access. And part of it is just that you are interacting with people who care about you, and interacting with professionals, medical professionals. I remember even at my needle exchange, and I'm sure these were volunteers, they would remember you. How are you doing today? You know, how's it been going? And they wouldn't push things about treatment, but sometimes they might mention, if you ever need a referral, you know, let us know, we can help you. The syringe services programs all have referrals to treatment, and so do the overdose prevention centers. And so when people feel connected to their community, you know, seen as a person, that can increase their willingness or ability to accept treatment. And the other side of that is that it's not, you're not having to spend so much of your life trying to just manage your substance use disorder, right? Which means you actually have time to think and reflect. It can reduce the chaos, the running to try to meet your needs as far as your drugs go, which has a positive mental effect. But part of it is just access to people who care and who you feel like are on your side. So the data is strong from Canada and from Europe for all these things. And the other thing I'll say about harm reduction is, to me, it's 2 prongs. One is people can't get recovery if they die, right? And so there is you want the death reduction benefit of harm reduction. But even if someone is not ready for going into treatment, or even never goes into treatment, we still don't want them to die over their substance use disorder, their mental health condition of substance use disorder. We don't want them to die over it. And we want them to be as healthy as they can be within that confines. It's better for the individual, but it's actually also better for society. Because I know, for example, in most major cities, emergency room visits and treatment of people that are homeless or on the edges financially with substance use disorders is very expensive. And so even if you only want to look at where your tax dollars are going, harm reduction can reduce the overall cost because it's keeping people healthy. But you know, they are people. I care about them for that reason, but it's multi-benefit.
Well, and again, to the point of our foundation and our mission about ending the stigma of addiction, I mean, that's got to, and again, you said it well about how you were with people that cared about you. I mean, what better way to tell someone that they're not the disease, right? You're not the cancer, you know, you're not your addiction, you know, but you're a person that we care about.
Yeah, you know, and the other thought I'll say about that is that there's this myth that abstinence is a light bulb. Okay, that one day the person with a substance use disorder will become 100% committed to abstinence. That is not how it usually works in my experience. That is not how it worked for me. I was really unsure that it was even on the board of possibility for me to get sober, but I used 3 times in my first 5 months, which was way better. And it took me longer than that to really get 100% committed to abstinence. And so I think we need to look at it as often it's a process, and harm reduction can be part of that process. One version of harm reduction I see in meetings is sometimes people, let's say they're addicted to alcohol and cannabis, they might give up alcohol first because they feel like it's having the bigger negative impact. And then when they get that under control, they'll start thinking about the cannabis. So it's not always has to be all or nothing. We need to let people find what they're what's going to work for them, what process moving forward, and get rid of this idea that it's 100% abstinence or it's failure, because that's not a helpful concept. And it's not realistic as to how it works in the real world.
Well, and I often say in treating other diseases, if we told someone that, say your cancer tumors, if unless you are completely absent of any cancer, then you're a failure and we're going to stop all treatment. How ridiculous is that, right? Right. We're thrilled if we reduce the size of the tumor.
Right. And even on diseases that you have some impact on, like diabetes, we don't, beat people up or stigmatize them if they have a piece of candy once in a while. Right. I mean, it's really got to be about what's the person ready for and how can we support where they are today. And hopefully they will then move forward in what we think is a positive direction. But even reducing harm is a positive. It can have a very positive impact on people's lives.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, Mary Beth, there's been so much that we've talked about today. I know I've taken a bunch of notes myself. I'm so excited to read your book when it comes out. And I know if it's not available now, it's going to be available real soon by the time that this shows. So we're excited to hear about that. If we want to get in touch with you, find out more about you, what are the ways that the audience can reach out and find out about Mary Beth?
Sure. So the book is available on Amazon and all the usual sites, From Junkie to Judge, Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. And I will tell your listeners that 30% of the book is about recovery, and there's guidelines and checklists in the back that they might find useful. My website is junkietoJudge.com. I have some essays I've written, some podcasts and other information, and you can message me through my website. I will answer every message. And I'm on Twitter @MaryBethO_. And so I hope everyone reaches out in one way or another.
Awesome. And as we close down today, Mary Beth, is there one message that an overriding thought that you want to leave the audience with today?
I think when you were talking earlier about wanting the recovery to be fast, that caught my attention, because I think part of it for friends and family in particular has to be patience, right? That recovery is not usually a straight uphill line. It's often, up and down. And that I know that can create fear when the person uses drugs after a period of sobriety. But to me, it's really the important question is, are they still committed to their plan? Has there been improvement? Are they putting together perhaps longer strings of sobriety or shorter periods of using? Look at the bigger picture and try to manage your fear. It is usually a process. A slip does not mean they will not succeed. And so I know it's hard, but patience for both the person in recovery and the friends and family can be actually really, really helpful.
Yeah. Oh, what a great message there. Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we can get together and talk again sometime in the future. This was fantastic.
Perfect. I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
You bet. And for everyone today, as always, I'm going to ask you to reach out to someone today. Tell them that you love them. This is Zach's dad.
This has been an episode of Zach's Life. Thank you so much for listening. For more info on our foundation and for addiction resources, visit ZacharyHortonFoundation.org or check us out on Facebook and Instagram. If you have a story to tell and want to be a guest on our podcast, email me directly at jim@ZacharyHortonFoundation.org.